Marcus Chen woke at 4:30 in the morning to the sound of his own breathing. The apartment above his restaurant was dark except for the blue glow of the city's advertising drones passing his window, their holograms painting fleeting brand logos across his ceiling. He lay still for a moment, watching a pharmaceutical company's mascot dissolve into particles of light, then swung his legs out of bed. The floor was cold. Real hardwood, not the synthetic stuff most people use now. He'd paid extra for it when he bought the building, one of his few concessions to luxury, though nobody knew that. Nobody knew he owned the building at all. He made coffee using the espresso machine, Italian. Commercial grade, the kind that could pull a perfect shot at 3 in the morning when your hands were shaking from exhaustion. It was the only thing in the apartment that looked expensive, sitting on the counter like a chrome sculpture among the second-hand furniture and bare walls. He'd bought it the day after the sale went through. $2.3 billion transferred to accounts his family would never know existed, and he'd celebrated by spending $4,000 on a machine that made coffee. His phone buzzed. A message from Richard, his wealth manager, whose office was in one of those glass towers downtown where people paid more for a parking space than Marcus paid for his entire year of living expenses. Morning meeting at 7. The Singapore grant needs final approval. Also, your sister called again, Marcus smiled. Victoria had been calling Richard's office for months, trying to get financial advice for her struggling brother. She'd somehow gotten the number from a mutual contact and assumed Richard handled small business accounting. She had no idea Richard's minimum client threshold was $50 million in liquid assets. He texted back. "I'll call in from the kitchen. And ignore Victoria, already do." But she's persistent. Marcus pocketed his phone and headed downstairs. The restaurant was silent, smelling of yesterday's cooking oil and the faint tang of industrial cleaner. He moved through the darkness by memory, not bothering with lights until he reached the kitchen. When he flipped the switch, the space came alive, stainless steel surfaces reflecting harsh fluorescent light, everything in its place because he'd put it there himself the night before. Jamal arrived at 5, using the key Marcus had given him 3 months ago. The kid was 22, looked 16, and had the kind of knife skills that came from watching too many cooking videos and practicing until your hands cramped. He'd aged out of foster care at 18 and had been bouncing between kitchens ever since, getting fired for talking back or showing up late or any of the 100 things young men did when nobody had ever taught them how to survive in a world that didn't care if they existed. "Morning, chef," Jamal said, tying his apron with the quick efficiency Marcus had taught him. "Morning. Let's work on your brunoise. You're still cutting too large." They worked in comfortable silence for 20 minutes, Jamal's knife moving faster as muscle memory took over. Marcus watched from the corner of his eye while prepping his own station, noting the improvement, the focus. The kid was good. He could be great if someone gave him a chance. "Hey, chef?" Jamal's voice was careful, the tone of someone about to ask for something they expected to be denied. "I got into that culinary program." "The one at Metro." Marcus kept his hands moving, mincing garlic. "That's good news." "Yeah, except it's like $18,000 for the year. Plus books and supplies and shit. So I'm gonna defer. Maybe try again next year when I've saved more." Marcus made a non-committal sound and pulled out his phone with one hand, typing quickly. A message to Richard: add Jamal Martinez to the scholarship list. Full ride plus stipend. Anonymous as usual, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Keep working on that knife work. You'll need it if you end up going, yeah." At 6:30, Marcus took the video call with Richard in his cluttered office behind the kitchen. On screen, Richard sat in a space that looked like it had been designed by someone who charged by the square foot, floor-to-ceiling windows. Minimalist furniture, the kind of abstract art that cost more than most people's houses. "You look homeless," Richard said by way of greeting. Marcus glanced down at his stained chef's coat and worn jeans. Good morning to you too. Your sister really is worried about you. She called twice yesterday. Asked if I could help you set up a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA. I told her we don't handle retail accounts. She offered to pay our consultation fee out of her own pocket. Marcus rubbed his face. Victoria meant well. That was the problem. She genuinely believed he was drowning, barely keeping his restaurants afloat, too proud to ask for help. She'd constructed an entire narrative about her struggling younger brother and cast herself as the successful sibling who could save him if only he'd let her. The Singapore grant, Marcus said, changing the subject. What's the holdup? No holdup. Just need your signature on the final documents. 15 million to 3 separate food security initiatives, all structured to appear as if they're coming from an anonymous donor collective, and the new foundation? The big one. Richard leaned back in his chair. 500 million seed funding, fully operational by next quarter. I've got the legal team working on the structure. It'll be airtight. No way to trace it back to you unless you want it traced. I figured. Though I still think you're insane. You could be living in a penthouse, driving cars people photograph for their social feeds. Dating celebrities. Instead you're living above a restaurant and letting your family think you're one bad month from bankruptcy. Marcus looked at the screen, at Richard's face that couldn't quite hide the genuine confusion. You know what I did yesterday? I'm afraid to ask. Taught a 19-year-old kid how to make stock from scratch. Real stock, not the synthetic shit. She cried when she tasted it because she'd never had real food before. Her parents couldn't afford it growing up, everything was lab-grown or printed. I showed her what real ingredients taste like, and she cried. Richard was quiet for a moment. And that's worth $3 billion to you, that's worth everything. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his office for a few minutes, staring at the framed photo on his desk. His mother, 10 years dead, standing next to him at the opening of his first restaurant. She was wearing a dress from a thrift store and smiling like she'd won the lottery. He'd been 28, terrified, convinced he'd fail within 6 months. She'd believed in him when nobody else did, when Victoria and Derek were still making jokes about their brother the dropout who thought he could run a restaurant. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Victoria, not a message but a full video call. He considered ignoring it, then answered. Victoria's face filled the screen, and behind her Marcus could see her kitchen, all marble counters and designer fixtures. The kind of space that appeared in lifestyle magazines. She was wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than his monthly food budget, her hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but had definitely required product and planning. Marcus, thank God. I was starting to think you were avoiding me. Never. Just busy, right, busy. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Dad's birthday party is Saturday night at the Riverside Country Club. Please tell me you're coming, I'll be there. Victoria's face did something complicated. Relief mixed with preemptive disappointment. And you'll dress appropriately? Marcus, Brad's business partners will be there. Derek is bringing his firm's senior partner. I just need you to make an effort. Marcus looked down at himself. What's wrong with what I wear? You wear jeans and t-shirts to family events. You show up in that car that sounds like it's dying. People ask me questions, Marcus. They ask if you're okay, if you need help, if the family knows you're struggling. I'm not struggling, I know you don't see it that way. But from the outside, it looks like you're barely holding on. And I'm not saying this to hurt you, I'm saying this because I love you and I want to help. There it was. The same conversation they'd been having for 4 years, since right after the sale when he'd decided not to tell anyone. Victoria had constructed her entire identity around success markers, the right house, the right car, the right friends, the right image on social feeds where her life appeared as a carefully curated stream of achievements. And Marcus, her younger brother, was a stain on that image. Not because he'd failed, but because he refused to perform success the way she understood it. "I'll wear something nice," he lied, "thank you." And Marcus? "If you need money for clothes or anything, just ask. I can loan you whatever you need." After she hung up, Marcus sat in the silence of his office and felt the familiar tension in his chest. The urge to tell her, to explain, to shatter her assumptions with the truth. But he'd held on to the secret for 4 years because he needed to know something. He needed to know if his family would respect him for who he was, not what he had. And so far, the answer was no. That evening, after the dinner rush, Marcus was helping bus tables when he noticed her. A woman sitting alone at the bar, watching him with an expression that was equal parts amusement and curiosity. She was striking, dark hair, elegant features, wearing clothes that whispered money rather than shouting it. The kind of understated expensive that required actual wealth, not the performative kind. She ordered the tasting menu and proceeded to eat with the kind of attention people usually reserved for prayer. Marcus found himself checking on her more than necessary, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. When he finally approached to ask about her meal, she looked up at him with green eyes that felt like a challenge. "The dumplings are extraordinary," she said, and her accent placed her somewhere in Ireland. "Szechuan pepper with an Irish butter finish?" Marcus blinked. Most people didn't catch that. "You have a good palate, I have a good teacher. My grandmother was obsessed with fusion cuisine before it was trendy. She'd combine flavors people said shouldn't work and somehow make them sing." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "These remind me of her cooking. The way you're not afraid to break rules." They talked about food and philosophy and the way cities gentrified ethnic cuisine until it became unrecognizable. About cooking for profit versus cooking for community. About the difference between feeding people and nourishing them. She asked questions that suggested she understood restaurants from the inside, not as a tourist but as someone who'd actually thought about how they worked. "I don't usually do this," Marcus found himself saying, "but we're testing a new menu next week. Private tasting, just the team and a few trusted palates. Would you want to come?" Her smile flickered. "I'd love to. But I'm only in town for a few more days. Flying back to Dublin tomorrow." Disappointment hit harder than it should have. "Well, if you're ever back, though I might be returning sooner than expected. My foundation is considering a project here." "What kind of foundation?" "Food security, educational access. We fund programs that give people skills, not just handouts." She tilted her head, studying him. "Your restaurant model actually came up in our research. The way you train and mentor staff, your retention rates, your supply chain efficiency. It's exactly the kind of approach we look for." Before Marcus could process that, a regular customer needed help with something. And when he turned back, the woman was settling her bill. Cash, generous tip, the kind of gesture that felt personal rather than performative. She handed him a business card as she stood. "Marcus Chen. I'll remember that name." He looked down at the card after she left. "Isla Reeves, Program Director, the Reeves Foundation." The name tickled something in his memory, and he pulled out his phone to search. The Reeves Foundation had an endowment of over $800 million, established by Irish shipping magnate Declan Reeves. Isla's bio listed degrees from Trinity College and the Sorbonne, a career in corporate law before she'd pivoted to philanthropy. Photos showed her at galas with people Marcus recognized from news feeds, politicians, business leaders, celebrities, chef. Jamal was standing next to him, looking curious. "You okay?" "Yeah." Marcus pocketed his phone. "I think I just got interviewed without realizing it." "That lady? She was watching you all night." "Like, really watching." "She's with a foundation. They fund food programs." Jamal's face lit up. "That's cool. Maybe they could help with the training program you were talking about. Marcus thought about the half-formed plans he'd been developing, the culinary academy he wanted to build, the idea of creating something larger than just his 3 restaurants. He'd been sketching it out for months, running numbers with Richard, imagining what it could become. Maybe, he said. The next afternoon, Marcus drove his 15-year-old Honda across the city to visit his father. The car made a rattling sound that was new, and the dashboard warning lights formed a constellation of mechanical problems he kept meaning to address. He could have replaced the car 1,000 times over, could have bought something that didn't sound like it was dying, but there was something comforting about the Honda's familiarity. It started every morning. It got him where he needed to go. That felt like enough. James Chen lived in a modest house in a neighborhood that hadn't quite gentrified yet. The kind of place where people still knew their neighbors' names and kids played in the street without supervision. Marcus's mother had loved this house. After she died, James had refused to move, even when Derek and Victoria offered to buy him something bigger, newer, in a better area. His father was in the kitchen making tea, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd spent 30 years sorting mail and knew the value of systems. He looked up when Marcus entered, his face creasing into a smile. "Your sister called," James said without preamble. "Said I should convince you to dress better for tomorrow." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat. "Did she mention she's worried about me?" "She mentioned several things. Her theory is that you're too proud to ask for help." "And what's your theory?" James poured tea into 2 cups, the cheap ceramic ones from the same set they'd been using for 20 years. He sat down across from Marcus and studied his son's face with the kind of attention that made Marcus feel simultaneously seen and exposed. "My theory," James said carefully, "is that you're conducting an experiment. You want to see how your family treats you when they think you have nothing. You want to know if they love you for who you are or what you can provide." Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm cup. And you've had your answer for 4 years now. Victoria treats you like a charity case. Derek makes jokes about your lifestyle. Your aunt asks strangers if you're going through something. At what point does the lesson become cruelty, son? To them or to yourself? It's not about cruelty. Then what's it about? Marcus stared into his tea, watching steam curl into nothing. When I do tell them, I need them to understand why I live this way. That the money didn't change me. That I'm still the same person I was when I was actually struggling. Because if they can't understand that, if they can't respect my choices even when they think I'm broke, then what does their respect mean when they find out I'm not? James was quiet for a long moment. You're assuming they'll be capable of that understanding. Some people aren't, Marcus. Some people measure worth in dollars and status and the things they can see on a social feed. You can't teach someone to value character if they've spent their whole life believing that money equals virtue. Victoria's not like that. Victoria is exactly like that. And I love her, but I'm not blind to who she's become. She married a man because he was successful. She built her career around selling luxury to wealthy people. She measures her worth in square footage and designer labels. And you, my son, are an embarrassment to her because you refuse to perform success the way she understands it. The words landed like stones. Marcus wanted to argue, to defend his sister, but his father's face held the kind of truth that came from watching your children grow into adults who sometimes disappointed you. "I'm bringing someone tomorrow," Marcus said, changing the subject. "To the party." James's eyebrows rose. "A date, maybe?" "I'm not sure yet. I met someone. She's different." Different how? Marcus thought about Isla, the way she'd watched him work, the questions she'd asked, the business card that sat in his wallet like a promise or a threat. She sees the restaurants, the work, and she's interested in that. Not what I drive or where I live. She asked about my mentorship program, my staff retention, my supply chain. Like those things mattered more than any of the surface stuff. Does she know? No. Nobody knows except you and Richard, and you're bringing her to the lion's den? James shook his head. But he was smiling. Son, you're either very brave or very stupid, maybe both. That night, alone in his apartment, Marcus did something uncharacteristic. He pulled out Isla's business card and dialed the number before he could talk himself out of it. It went to voicemail. Her voice was professional, clipped, the tone of someone who got 100 calls a day and couldn't afford to waste time on messages. Marcus waited for the beep. Hi, Isla. This is Marcus Chen from the restaurant. I know you said you're heading back to Dublin, but I have a strange question. My father's 70th birthday is tomorrow night at the Riverside Country Club, and I could really use an ally in a room full of people who think they know everything about me. 7 p.m. No pressure, and I know it's last minute, but if you're still in town, call me. He hung up and immediately regretted it. Too desperate. Too weird. Too much too soon with someone he'd spoken to for all of 20 minutes. She was probably already on a plane back to Ireland, probably already forgotten him, probably. His phone rang 30 seconds later. Marcus Chen, Isla said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I'm still in town. Flight got pushed to Sunday. And I happen to love crashing family parties where I know exactly one person. Fair warning, my family is a lot. Wealthy and insufferable? No, actually. Middle class and insufferable. They think I'm the family failure. There was a pause, and when Isla spoke again, her voice carried a note of intrigue that made Marcus's pulse quicken. Now I'm definitely coming. Text me the details. After they hung up, Marcus sat on his second-hand couch in his modest apartment above his restaurant and felt something unfamiliar uncurl in his chest. Anticipation maybe. Or hope. Or the dangerous possibility that someone might see him, actually see him, and like what they found. Outside his window, the city hummed with its nighttime rhythm. Advertising drones painted the sky with brand messages nobody would remember. His phone buzzed with a message from Richard about the Singapore grant. In his kitchen downstairs, Jamal had probably left a note about tomorrow's prep list, some question about technique or timing. This was Marcus's life. Small and contained and deliberately constructed to be exactly what it was. And tomorrow, he'd walk into his father's birthday party wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that Victoria would hate, with a woman he barely knew who might or might not blow his entire careful construction to pieces. He was looking forward to it. The hover car settled onto the landing pad in formation, their anti-grav engines humming in descending tones as the magnetic clamps engaged. Marcus watched through the reinforced glass of his building's maintenance bay as the sleek vehicles arrived one by one, each worth more than most people earned in 5 years. His own transit pod, 15 years old, manual steering, no AI assist, sat in the corner like a museum piece, its paint oxidized to a dull gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The building's concierge AI pinged his neural implant with a notification he'd been dreading all week. Chen Family Gathering. Location, Skyline Reserve, Level 87. Dress code, formal. Your attendance is noted as confirmed. He hadn't confirmed anything, but Victoria had probably done it for him. Again, Marcus pulled on his jacket, real cotton, not the temperature-regulating smart fabric everyone wore now, and ran his hand over the worn leather of his grandfather's watch. No holographic display, no biometric tracking, no connection to the network. Just hands that moved in circles, marking time the way time had been marked for centuries. The transit pod coughed twice before the engine caught. Marcus patted the dashboard like he was reassuring an old dog, then manually input the destination coordinates. The navigation system, ancient enough to still use satellites instead of quantum positioning, plotted a route that would take 40 minutes. The newer vehicles could make it in 12, their AIs negotiating traffic patterns in real time, their passengers never feeling a bump or turn. Marcus preferred the bumps. They reminded him things were real. The city at dusk was a canyon of light and glass, buildings that grew like crystals from the old streets below, their surfaces alive with advertisements and status displays. Every tower broadcast its residents' aggregate social scores, their combined wealth indices, their collective achievements. The skyline reserve glowed gold at its peak, a beacon of exclusivity that could be seen from anywhere in the district. The valet platform extended as Marcus approached, but the attendant's expression shifted when he saw what was coming. The kid, couldn't be more than 20, with the glossy look of someone whose parents had paid for genetic optimization, actually took a step back as the transit pod settled onto the pad with a wheeze. "Sir, I think you might have the wrong address. The service entrance is Chen Party. James Chen." The kid's augmented reality contact lenses flickered as he pulled up the guest list, probably cross-referencing Marcus's face against the database. The micro-expression of surprise was quickly smoothed over by professional training, but Marcus had caught it. He always caught it, of course, Mr. Chen. "I'll just need to find a spot for this, take your time." She's temperamental. Inside, the private event space occupied the entire 87th floor, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling smart glass that could project any environment its occupants desired. Tonight it showed a sunset over mountains that had been submerged by rising oceans decades ago, a nostalgia-soaked fantasy for people who'd never actually stood on a mountain. The guests moved through this artificial landscape like they belonged there, their clothes shifting colors to complement the changing light, their jewelry emitting soft pulses synchronized to their heartbeats, tiny status indicators that said "I'm alive, I'm here, I matter." Victoria materialized from the crowd before Marcus had taken 3 steps. She wore a dress that wasn't quite a dress, more like liquid mercury held in place by strategic electromagnetic fields, and her hair moved with a life of its own, each strand individually programmed to respond to air currents and ambient music. When she saw Marcus, her smile engaged but her eyes didn't change. "You came. And you're wearing." She paused, her gaze traveling from his cotton jacket to his manual lace shoes. It's clean, it's analog." Victoria glanced around to see who might be watching. "Derek's entire board is here. Brad's partners brought their investors. Couldn't you have at least worn a hollow tie?" "I don't own a hollow tie, I know. I've started keeping one at my place for emergencies." "Remind me next time." "There won't be a next time if I play this right." Victoria's expression flickered, something between concern and irritation. "The bar is quantum mixology. Try not to order beer. Dad's sitting with the Matsui family, and they own half the Pacific Rim's shipping lanes, so please don't tell them about your supply chain philosophies. Just mingle. Smile. Let people think you're doing okay." Marcus watched his sister walk away, her dress rippling with each step, leaving traces of light in the air. She'd always been beautiful, but now she was curated, every cell optimized, every feature refined, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. She looked like success was supposed to look in 2089. And that was the point. Derek appeared next, moving with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd recently had his neural implant upgraded to the latest processor. His suit was composed of smart fabric that displayed his law firm's logo across the shoulders, subtle but impossible to miss, a walking advertisement for his own importance. He grabbed Marcus's shoulder hard enough to activate the pressure sensors in Marcus's subcutaneous health monitor, the vintage pod. My God. Is that thing even legal anymore? I thought they banned manual steering inside the city core. Grandfather clause. That's not a real thing, Marcus. I'm a lawyer, I would know. Derek's laugh was too loud. Designed to attract attention. Listen, I'm upgrading to a Tesla Quantum next month. 0-point energy, quantum entanglement navigation, full sensory VR for passengers. The old car is yours if you want it. Seriously, family discount. Can't have you showing up to Dad's next birthday in something that predates the neural net. It runs fine, does it though? Derek squeezed Marcus's shoulder again, this time reading as concern instead of aggression. Look, we need to talk about your situation. I mean, Victoria and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time for an intervention. The restaurants are great, man, really impressive that you kept them going this long. But let's be realistic about sustainability and long-term growth potential. Brad materialized from the crowd like he'd been summoned, his augmented reality interface projecting stock tickers and market data into the air around his head in a sphere of constantly updating information. He shook Marcus's hand with a grip calibrated to convey dominance, his palm sensors probably reading Marcus's stress hormones and blood pressure. Marcus Chin. The food guy. Still running those heritage restaurants in the old neighborhoods? 3 of them now, 3. Brad's expression suggested Marcus had just confessed to collecting bottle caps. That's ambitious. You know the failure rate for restaurants is 83% in the first year now, right? AI-optimized chains have basically captured the entire market. Have you thought about exit strategies? I could show you some basic portfolio diversification, get you into quantum computing futures at least. Build some actual wealth before the whole legacy food thing collapses. I appreciate it. No, you don't, but you should. Brad turned to Derek, his voice not lowering quite enough. Kid's got heart. I respect the hustle. Sophie cut through the crowd like she was swimming upstream, ignoring her mother's attempt to intercept her. 19 years old, pre-med at the state university instead of the private academies her parents had wanted, studying community health instead of aesthetic reconstruction. She hugged Marcus hard enough that her emotion-tracking bracelet lit up yellow for joy. And he felt something in his chest relax. Uncle Marcus. Thank God. Everyone here is either talking about their social scores or their investment portfolios, and I'm about 2 seconds from jumping off this building. Victoria's voice cut across the space. Sophie, don't monopolize your uncle. He needs to network. Sophie ignored her mother completely. Come on. Balcony. Now, they stepped out onto the terrace where the smart glass had been programmed to show stars, real stars, not the light-polluted haze that actually hung over the city. The air out here was filtered and climate-controlled, 72 degrees exactly, humidity at 40%, a perfection that felt artificial because it was. Sophie leaned against the railing, her expression shifting to something more serious. How are you actually doing? Mom's been in maximum worry mode, which is her way of saying she's embarrassed. I'm good. The restaurants are thriving. Jamal just got accepted to the Culinary Institute. Did you? Made some calls. He earned it on his own merit. Sophie's smile was knowing, warm. You're the best. She hesitated, pulling up her AR interface with a gesture, then dismissing it. Can I ask you something weird? There's the scholarship program, completely anonymous, like they literally won't tell you who funds it. But it's for medical students focused on underserved populations, and the application asked specifically about volunteer work at community restaurants, and the timeline matches exactly when you and I first talked about my wanting to work in free clinics instead of. Sounds like a great program, right? Sophie's gaze held his for a long moment. Whoever set it up is changing lives. I want to be like them someday. You already are. Inside, the crowd had thickened, the social dynamics crystallizing into visible hierarchies. People clustered around the Matsui family, around Derek's senior partners, around anyone whose net worth or social score gave them gravitational pull. Marcus watched it happen like he was observing a chemical reaction, inevitable and predetermined. Aunt Linda descended on him with a wine glass that changed color with each sip, its smart liquid analyzing her blood alcohol level and adjusting the alcohol content accordingly. Her voice carried across the room despite the acoustic dampening fields. Marcus, sweetheart. Still single? My hairdresser's daughter just divorced, her husband got caught running a crypto scheme. Lost everything. She's looking for someone stable. Well, someone in general. She's not picky anymore. Derek's laugh activated his social media implants, automatically sharing the moment with his followers. Aunt Linda, Marcus is married to his work. Can't date when you're elbow deep in sauce 18 hours a day, that's the problem. Aunt Linda's emotion tracking makeup shifted to concerned pink. Women can smell financial instability, Marcus. It's biological. You need status indicators, a decent vehicle, a proper apartment above the 50th floor, clothes that display your achievement level. You're invisible right now. I'm fine with invisible. Victoria appeared again. Her hand closing around Marcus's elbow with enough pressure to trigger his health monitor's warning signal. Marcus. Hallway. Now, they stepped into the service corridor where the staff moved like ghosts, their AR uniforms projecting the restaurant's logo, their every movement tracked and scored by management algorithms. Victoria waited until they were alone before her curated expression cracked. Okay. I'm saying this because I love you, and because someone has to. Your simple living thing has gone from quirky to concerning. Dad's friends are asking if you need financial intervention. The Matsui family asked if you were going through something. I've been telling people the restaurants are a passion project. A heritage preservation thing, but they're starting to wonder if you're actually struggling, financially, emotionally, mentally, take your pick. Victoria's dress shifted to agitated red, responding to her stress levels. You're almost 40, Marcus. You live in a pre-renovation apartment without climate control or smart walls. You drive a vehicle that doesn't even have basic AI navigation. You buy your clothes from vintage stores instead of having them custom printed. To everyone here, you look like you've given up. Given up on what? On success. On advancement. On joining the world the rest of us live in. Victoria pulled up a holographic document with a gesture. Financial projections floating between them. I've set up a meeting with Brad's AI financial consultant. Just one session. Let it analyze your situation, show you investment strategies, get you into the quantum markets. You could build real wealth, Marcus. Generational wealth, I don't need. Yes, you do. You're too proud to see it. Victoria's voice dropped, taking on the tone of someone delivering difficult news. I've been setting money aside. For you. For when the restaurants fail, and they will fail, Marcus, 90% of legacy businesses are gone within 5 years. I have about 50,000 credits saved. It's yours, no conditions. Well, one condition, you use it to actually invest in your future instead of throwing it into these money pits. Marcus stared at his sister. She believed every word. She genuinely thought she was saving him, Victoria. Thank you. Really. But I don't need it, that's exactly what someone who needs it would say. Marcus's neural implant pinged with a message. Isla. Outside. Should I come in or are you having second thoughts? He typed back with his eyes, the text appearing in his peripheral vision. Come in. It's time. The doors to the event space opened, and Isla Reeves entered. The room didn't stop, these people were too sophisticated for that, but the ambient conversation shifted tone, the way a musical chord changes when one note is added. Isla wore a dress that looked simple until you really looked at it. At which point you realized the fabric was impossibly complex, reacting to light in ways that suggested technology that wasn't commercially available yet. Her hair moved naturally, no programming, no algorithmic optimization. The only jewelry she wore was a vintage watch that didn't connect to anything, didn't display anything, just marked time. She scanned the room with the ease of someone who'd attended 1,000 events like this, spotted Marcus, and her expression shifted to something genuine. She walked through the crowd like it wasn't there, and people moved without meaning to, their social ranking algorithms recognizing something that made them defer. She kissed Marcus's cheek, her hand resting briefly on his chest, right over his heart. "Sorry I'm late, love. Flight from Dublin was delayed, weather control system glitched over the Atlantic, and then the hotel completely mucked up my reservation. Had to threaten them with a bad review on the global network before they found my room." The Irish accent turned every head in range. Victoria appeared instantly, her dress flashing to interested gold. "Hi. I'm Victoria, Marcus's sister. You are, Isla. And yes, a friend." She looked at Marcus, her smile warm. "Though I'm hoping to upgrade that status," Derek materialized, his neural implant probably already running facial recognition and social graph analysis. "From Dublin? What brings you to our humble city?" "Work initially." But Marcus made a compelling case for staying longer. She took Marcus's arm naturally, like they'd done this 1,000 times. Brad's AR sphere expanded to include Isla, market data, and social scores flickering through the air. "What kind of work?" "I'm with a foundation. Global food security and education programs." Brad's expression shifted to that particular mix of condescension and pity reserved for nonprofit workers. "That's admirable. Must be very fulfilling." "It is. We manage an endowment of about 800 million credits, so there's quite a lot of fulfillment to distribute." The number hit like a sonic weapon. Brad's market data flickered and refocused. Derek's social smile locked in place. Victoria's dress cycled through 3 colors before settling on calculating blue. "How did you and Marcus meet?" "His restaurant actually. I was researching sustainable food programs, and his operational model came up in our analysis database. Had to see it myself." Aunt Linda's makeup shifted to confused orange. "Database? For restaurants, for innovative business models in economically challenged areas. Marcus's staff retention rate, his training program outcomes, his supply chain efficiency, it's remarkable. We've analyzed thousands of establishments globally, and his approach is genuinely unique." Derek's laugh sounded forced. "Come on, it's 3 small restaurants. That's hardly 3 successful establishments in economically depressed zones with a 98% retention rate and a training program that's placed 17 people in professional culinary careers over 4 years. Do you know how statistically improbable that is?" Sophie appeared at Marcus's other side, grinning. "I like her." 6 months had passed since James's birthday dinner, and Marcus stood in the entrance of what had once been an abandoned warehouse in the city's forgotten industrial district. The building had good bones, high ceilings with exposed steel beams, original brick walls that had weathered a century of use. Windows that let in streams of natural light the LED-saturated city had almost forgotten existed. The ground floor now housed Chen's kitchen, his 4th restaurant, but the real transformation was upstairs where 2 full floors had been converted into classroom spaces, test kitchens, and administrative offices for the Culinary Academy. The opening day ceremony was scheduled for noon, and guests had already begun arriving. Marcus watched them through the restaurant's front window, noting the mix of people, former students from his other locations, community leaders, city officials who'd suddenly discovered an interest in neighborhood development now that cameras would be present. And his family, his family. That was still an adjustment. Victoria emerged from a vehicle that was noticeably less ostentatious than the one she'd driven 6 months ago, a hybrid sedan, modest but well-maintained, the kind of car someone bought because it made sense rather than because it made a statement. She wore professional clothes that looked expensive but not aggressively so, and her hair was styled simply, no algorithmic programming making it move in artificial patterns. Sophie climbed out after her, carrying a stack of tablets loaded with the nutrition curriculum she'd spent 3 months developing. Marcus stepped outside to greet them, Isla appearing at his side with the natural synchronicity they'd developed over the past months of working together. Isla's hand found his automatically, their fingers interlacing, a gesture so routine now that Marcus barely registered it until he saw Victoria's smile, genuine, warm, nothing like the careful expression she'd worn for most of her adult life. "This is incredible, Marcus." Victoria turned in a slow circle, taking in the building's facade, the neighborhood that had begun showing signs of revitalization, fresh paint on buildings that had been tagged with graffiti for years, new businesses opening in long-vacant storefronts, people walking the streets who looked like they belonged instead of passing through as quickly as possible. "Sophie did most of the nutrition curriculum," Marcus said, deflecting. "I just provided the space." Sophie rolled her eyes, a gesture that was pure teenage disdain despite her 19 years. "Uncle Marcus designed the entire program structure, hired all the staff personally, interviewed every single applicant for the first cohort, and has been here until midnight most nights making sure everything is perfect." "But sure, you just provided the space." Details. Marcus took the tablets from Sophie, their weight familiar. "How's the gap year treating you?" "Better than it's treating Mom's friends." Sophie's grin was wicked. "You should hear them at the country club." "Sophie's taking time off before medical school to teach nutrition at a restaurant? Like I've joined a cult." "You basically have," Isla said, her Irish accent making the joke land softer. "The cult of actually giving a damn about people." "Very dangerous ideology," Victoria laughed, the sound startling Marcus with its unguarded quality. His sister had changed in subtle ways over the past 6 months, still successful, still polished, still the kind of person who turned heads when she entered a room, but the desperate edge had softened. She worked fewer hours now, had started volunteering at a youth photography program she'd founded using connections Marcus had quietly provided, and according to Sophie, she and Brad were actually talking to each other instead of scheduling intimacy through their AI assistants. "Is Derek here yet?" Victoria asked, scanning the arriving crowd. "Not yet. He texted saying he was running late, had to finish up at the clinic." Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest at the words. Derek had shocked everyone by taking a year-long sabbatical from his corporate firm to work full-time at a legal aid clinic he'd helped establish. The partnership track was officially on hold, his neural implant upgrade had been cancelled, and by all accounts, Derek was happier than he'd been in a decade. A vehicle pulled up that Marcus didn't recognize, older model, manual steering, the kind of practical transportation that prioritized function over status. Derek climbed out, followed by a woman Marcus had met twice before at family dinners. Elena was a public defender, sharp and funny, with the kind of fierce intelligence that came from years of fighting battles most people didn't even know were happening. She wore clothes from vintage stores, drove her own aging vehicle, and according to Derek, had told him on their second date that his BMW was compensating for something and she wasn't impressed. Derek had sold the BMW the following week. "Sorry we're late." Derek embraced Marcus, the gesture still slightly awkward but genuine. "Had a client meeting that ran over, kid getting evicted, landlord was trying some creative interpretation of tenant law." Elena destroyed him. "I merely pointed out that ignoring city housing codes doesn't become legal just because you own the building." Elena shook Marcus's hand, her grip firm. "Congratulations on the academy." "Derek hasn't shut up about it for 3 months. He offered to provide free legal services to our graduates," Marcus said. "Business formation, contract review, general counsel." His firm agreed to sponsor it. "Pro bono work looks good on their annual report," Derek said, but his smile was knowing. "Also, I made it clear I wasn't coming back unless they committed to actual community investment." Turns out leverage is useful sometimes. James arrived last, moving slower than Marcus remembered but with the same sharp awareness in his eyes. He'd turned 71 3 months ago, celebrated with a small family dinner at Marcus's apartment, 800 square feet that had somehow accommodated 9 people comfortably because nobody was performing anymore. They'd eaten takeout from Chen's kitchen, drunk wine from actual glasses instead of smart drinkware that monitored alcohol consumption, and talked until past midnight about things that mattered: my son, the teacher. James embraced Marcus, holding on longer than usual. Your mother would be proud. Hell, I'm proud enough for both of us, learned from the best. Marcus felt his throat tighten. His father looked older these days, the years catching up in ways that made Marcus acutely aware of time's passage. But James also looked content, settled in a way that Marcus didn't remember from his childhood, like he'd finally seen his children understand the lessons he'd been trying to teach them their entire lives. The ceremony itself was simple. No holographic displays, no augmented reality enhancements, no social media live streams with real-time engagement metrics. Just people gathered in a space that smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings, their attention focused on the 17 students who stood nervously in their new chef's whites, faces reflecting every emotion from hope to terror. Marcus stood before them with Isla at his side, and for a moment he was overwhelmed by the responsibility of it: 17 lives that could go in any direction. 17 people who'd been through hell and were trusting him to show them a way forward. He thought about Roberto, the chef who'd given a stupid 19-year-old kid a chance despite every reason not to. Roberto had died 5 years ago, never knowing what Marcus had become, never seeing the empire built on the foundation of those early lessons about dignity and consistency and showing up even when everything hurt. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your lives. Marcus's voice was steady despite the emotion pressing against his chest. You're here because someone saw potential in you. Maybe a teacher, a counselor, a social worker. Or maybe you saw it in yourself and fought like hell to get here. Either way, you made it. And that matters. Isla stepped forward, her presence commanding without being aggressive. This program is fully funded: tuition, books, housing stipends, everything. We're not asking you to take on debt or sacrifice your financial stability to learn. The only thing we ask in return is that someday, when you've made it, you help someone else the way we're helping you. That's the deal. That's the entire contract, Marcus resumed, his gaze moving across each student's face, seeing himself in their expressions. One more thing. Every person in this room has a story. Some of you have experienced homelessness, incarceration, abuse, systems that were designed to forget you existed. That's your past. It's part of who you are, but it doesn't have to define who you become. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I started as a dishwasher. I dropped out of college after 1 semester because I couldn't afford it and didn't see the point. I lived paycheck to paycheck, ate ramen most days, wore clothes from donation bins, and drove a car that broke down more often than it ran. And I built something that changed my life. Not because I was special or talented or lucky. Because I was consistent. I showed up. I learned. I stayed even when staying was hard. A hand went up, young woman, maybe 20, with the kind of haunted eyes that spoke of experiences Marcus could only imagine. Mr. Chen, is it true you're a billionaire? The question created ripples of discomfort through the family members present, but Marcus had been expecting it. He'd learned over the past 6 months that secrets were exhausting and honesty, however uncomfortable, was easier. I have money, yes. I sold a business I built and made more from that sale than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But that's not why I'm here. Marcus held the young woman's gaze. I'm here because 17 years ago, a chef named Roberto Martinez took a chance on a kid who didn't know a Santoku knife from a cleaver, who'd never worked in a professional kitchen, who was one bad decision away from giving up entirely. He taught me that cooking is about more than food, it's about dignity, community, transformation. It's about showing up and doing the work even when nobody's watching, even when the reward seems impossibly far away. Marcus felt Isla's hand slip into his, grounding him. Roberto died 5 years ago. Massive heart attack in the kitchen of a restaurant he'd worked at for 30 years. He never knew what I became, never saw any of this. But everything I built is because of what he taught me. So this academy, this opportunity I'm giving you, it's not charity. It's not me being generous. It's me paying forward a debt I can never fully repay. The young woman nodded slowly, something in her expression shifting from skepticism to tentative hope. What if we fail? Then you fail. And then you get up and try again. Marcus smiled slightly. Failure is only permanent if you decide it is. Everything else is just information about what didn't work this time. After the ceremony, after the formal photographs and the tour of the facilities and the carefully prepared lunch that the current restaurant staff had prepared with obvious pride, Marcus found himself alone in the empty classroom space with Isla. The guests had filtered out, the students had been taken to their dormitory accommodations, and the building had settled into the quiet that comes after significant events. Isla stood at the window overlooking the street, her silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun that had finally broken through the city's perpetual cloud cover. She'd changed since that first night at James's birthday dinner, not in any dramatic way, but in the small accumulations that marked real intimacy. She kept a toothbrush at Marcus's apartment now, her clothes mixed with his in the closet that barely held them both, her books scattered among his on the shelves they'd installed together on a Sunday afternoon when neither of them had anywhere else to be. We did it. Isla's voice was soft, reflective. You did it. I just wrote the checks. Marcus joined her at the window, close enough that their shoulders touched. You designed the curriculum, hired the staff personally, interviewed every applicant, spent 6 months renovating this building, and have been here until past midnight most nights making sure every detail was perfect. Isla turned to face him, her expression caught between amusement and exasperation. But sure, you just wrote the checks. Okay, we did it, better. She kissed him, the gesture casual in a way that still made Marcus's pulse spike. 6 months together and he still wasn't used to this, someone who saw him completely and chose him anyway, someone who matched his work ethic without needing to compete, someone who made him laugh and challenged his assumptions and occasionally told him he was being an idiot when he needed to hear it. Isla pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his face. I have a question. Yeah, your apartment. Above the original restaurant. Is there room for two? Marcus felt his heart stutter. They'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks. Both of them aware it was coming but neither quite ready to initiate. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if the dishwasher billionaire has space in his modest life for an Irish Foundation director who's fallen completely in love with him. Isla's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the vulnerability underneath, the risk of saying it plainly, of putting the words into the world where they could be rejected. That's pretty specific. Marcus felt a smile pulling at his mouth despite the seriousness of the moment. Answer the question, Chin, there's room. But fair warning, it's still just 800 square feet, 1 bathroom, and the shower pressure is terrible because the building's plumbing dates from 1952 and I haven't gotten around to upgrading it. I grew up in a drafty castle where the heating didn't work half the time and my bedroom was so cold I could see my breath most mornings from October through April. Isla's smile was soft, genuine. I think I can handle questionable shower pressure, and you're really okay with this? With me? Marcus heard the uncertainty in his own voice, the part of him that still couldn't quite believe this was real. I'm not going to suddenly start living in a penthouse or buying yachts or wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. This is who I am. This is probably who I'm always going to be, Marcus. Isla's hands came up to frame his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Shut up and kiss me, he did, backing her gently against the wall, his hand sliding to her waist as hers threaded through his hair. The kiss deepened, months of careful boundaries dissolving into something more immediate, more honest. Marcus felt her smile against his mouth, felt her pull him closer, felt the reality of this moment, not the fantasy of what could be, but the actual, tangible truth of what was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than the moment strictly required, Isla was grinning. "For the record, I already moved half my things in. Your dad gave me a key 2 months ago." Marcus blinked, processing. "He did what?" "He stopped by the restaurant. We had tea, we talked about you for 2 hours, he told me stories about you as a kid that were absolutely mortifying, and you're going to be furious when I bring them up later, and then he handed me a key to your apartment. Said he wanted to make sure you didn't accidentally stay single forever because you were too busy working to notice someone was trying to date you." Meddling old man, smart old man. Isla kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Now come on. We have 17 students starting classes tomorrow, a foundation to run, partnerships to finalize, and a modest life to build together." When you put it that way, it sounds pretty good, it sounds perfect. They walked out together. Marcus's hand finding Isla's automatically as they moved through the building, turning off lights, checking locks, performing the small rituals that marked the end of a significant day. Through the window, Marcus could see his vehicle, the Subaru he'd bought when the Honda finally gave up after 15 years and 300,000 miles of faithful service. Isla had sold her luxury vehicle 3 months ago and bought a hybrid similar to Victoria's, something practical and efficient that didn't broadcast wealth or status. They drove through the city as dusk settled in, the towers around them lighting up with their nightly displays of achievement and aspiration. Marcus watched it all with the detachment of someone who'd climbed that mountain and found the view disappointing. What he'd found instead, in restaurant kitchens and late-night conversations and moments of genuine human connection, was worth more than any fortune. And now he'd found someone who understood that, who'd walked away from her own version of that empty summit to build something real. His neural implant pinged with a message from Derek. "Legal services contract is finalized. Sending it over for your review. Also, Elena wants to know if you're hiring for the academy. She has a client who'd be perfect." Marcus smiled, typing a response with his eyes while Isla drove. "Send her information. We have 2 spots left in the next cohort." Another message, this one from Victoria. "Sophie wants to develop a health and wellness component for the program. Can we meet this week to discuss?" Thursday lunch. Chen's kitchen. "Bring appetite and ideas." A third message, from James. "Proud of you, son. See you Sunday for dinner." Marcus looked at Isla, her profile illuminated by the dashboard lights, her expression content as she navigated the evening traffic with easy competence. 6 months ago, he'd walked into his father's birthday dinner expecting confrontation and revelation, prepared for the moment when his carefully maintained cover would be stripped away. He'd brought Isla as a shield, as proof that someone could see him clearly and value what they found. What he hadn't expected was how that revelation would change everything, not just for him, but for his entire family. Victoria had stepped back from the edge of burnout and rediscovered the photographer she'd wanted to be. Derek had abandoned the partnership track that was killing him slowly and found work that actually mattered. Sophie had gained the courage to pursue medicine on her own terms instead of following the prestigious path her mother had mapped out, and Marcus had learned that hiding wasn't the same as humility, that secrets could be as corrosive as lies, that being seen, truly seen, was terrifying but necessary. "What are you thinking about?" Isla asked, glancing at him briefly before returning her attention to the road. "That I should have told them years ago. Would have saved a lot of unnecessary drama, maybe. Or maybe they needed to earn the truth by learning to see you without it." Isla's hand found his, their fingers interlacing on the center console. "Either way, you're free now. No more pretending, no more hiding, no more wondering if people respect you for your character or your bank account. Just the character, apparently. The bank account seems to scare people off, not all people." Isla smiled, squeezing his hand. "Some people find the combination absolutely irresistible." They pulled up outside Marcus's building, their building now, Marcus supposed, and sat for a moment in comfortable silence. Above them, the restaurant's sign glowed softly. Chen's Kitchen spelled out in simple letters that didn't flash or animate or compete for attention. Next door, a handmade sign announced the upcoming opening of Victoria's photography studio, community classes, portfolio development, free sessions for youth who couldn't afford professional photos for college applications. Across the street, a former pawn shop was being converted into Derek's legal clinic, the windows already displaying information about free consultations and sliding scale fees. The neighborhood was changing, not through gentrification that pushed existing residents out, but through investment that gave them reasons to stay, resources that had been systematically denied for decades. This was success, Marcus thought. Not the towers in the distance broadcasting their aggregate wealth, not the vehicles that cost more than houses, not the status indicators that quantified human worth into numbers and scores. This, a restaurant that trained people and fed them, an academy that offered second chances. A community that was being rebuilt from the inside out by people who actually lived there. Ready? Isla asked, her hand already on the door handle. Marcus looked at her, this woman who'd flown 3,000 miles based on a 20-minute conversation and a feeling, who'd relocated her entire life to build something with him, who'd fallen in love with a secret billionaire living like a monk and never once suggested he change. Yeah, he said, climbing out of the vehicle to meet her on the sidewalk. Let's go home. They walked into the building together, past the restaurant where the dinner service was winding down, up the stairs that creaked in familiar patterns, to the door of an 800-square-foot apartment with terrible shower pressure and second-hand furniture and everything that actually mattered. Marcus unlocked the door. Isla had her own key now, apparently had for months thanks to his meddling father, and they stepped inside. The space was small but comfortable, lived in a way that came from actual living rather than professional staging. Isla's books mixed with his on the shelves, her jacket hanging next to his by the door, her presence woven into the fabric of a life he'd built carefully and was now learning to share. This was enough. This was everything. Not the fantasy of what success should look like, but the reality of what it actually was, work that mattered, love that was real, a life built on values that couldn't be quantified or optimized or displayed on a social media feed. Marcus pulled Isla close, feeling her arms wrap around him, feeling the truth of this moment settle into his bones. He'd been hiding for 4 years, testing his family, proving a point that probably didn't need proving. But in the end, that revelation had freed all of them, himself included. I love you, he said quietly, the words still new enough to feel risky. I know. Isla's smile was warm against his chest. You tell me every time you introduce me to another former student, every time you explain why you bought this building instead of a penthouse, every time you choose values over convenience. I've known for months, and I love you too, you absolutely ridiculous man. She pulled back to look at him. Now feed me. I've been too nervous all day to eat, and if I don't get food soon, I'm going to start making questionable decisions. Marcus laughed, feeling the last of the day's tension drain away. This was home, not the address or the square footage or the monetary value, but the person who made it feel like coming back to yourself after being lost. He'd been searching for this his entire adult life, and somehow, improbably, he'd found it. They ordered takeout from Chen's Kitchen, staff meal, nothing fancy, the kind of food that nourished rather than impressed. They ate sitting on the floor because all the chairs were occupied by books and papers from the academy planning. They talked about the students, about the curriculum, about Isla's family in Ireland who wanted to visit and meet the mysterious man who'd convinced their daughter to leave her castle for an 800-square-foot apartment above a restaurant, and when they finally made it to bed, a mattress on a frame that Marcus had assembled himself from instructions that made no sense. They lay in comfortable silence, Isla's head on Marcus's chest, his arms around her, two people who'd found in each other. The thing they didn't know they were missing. Outside, the city hummed with its endless ambition, its desperate striving, its measurement and optimization and performance of success. But here, in 800 square feet with terrible shower pressure and second-hand furniture, Marcus Chen had everything that mattered. And finally, for the first time in years, he wasn't hiding it.